All right, we'll go ahead and get started. Hello, everybody. My name is Josh Singer. Teaching this quick presentation on tips on having tough conversations about race as part of kind of a part of an add-on lesson to the People School of DC, the Intro to Racism and White Privilege course that we've been doing. We just did the first month, but it's an 8-month long course. If you're interested in learning more about the course or the People School or different anti-racism initiatives and social justice initiatives in the greater DC area, definitely check out our website, peopleschooldc.org. Not only do we do a lot of anti-racism and social justice work, but we also we're created our site as a resource, as like a social justice resource website for DC. So if, to kind of learn how to get involved in different social justice areas, if we have a massive amount of lists that we list all different kinds of great organizations doing great work in DC, and the hopes of trying to connect people to the different areas of social justice work that they want to do. But anyway, we created this class originally in the 8-month Intro to Racism course. The last month is dedicated to different ways to confront racism individually in organizations, interpersonally, in society. So we'll be spending like a whole month kind of exploring that. But in the meantime, just throughout that last month, there was a lot of questions about, how do we actually have, these tough conversations? A lot of anti-racism classes and courses and work, they always, they push the importance of white people being more involved in anti-racist work and being anti-racist activists, and having the hard conversations with our white circles or our friends, families, and coworkers and community members. But oftentimes we don't say, give any tips how to have these conversations, and they don't end very well a lot of times. So I took the section from that last month, and I'm going to go ahead and just present it now. And then this is definitely a work in progress. I'm hoping that people are watching this, that they have extra tips and extra ideas or feedback to email me, and we can include this, and maybe we can do this presentation multiple times throughout the 8-month course, with hopefully with new information that we get from other people. So on the last slide is my email. Or just go to peopleschool.org and you'll find our contact info. But I'm excited to do this presentation. Basically spent the last 5 years just kind of grabbing every possible tip I could find about how to have these really tough conversations. And so we're going to present 20 tips today. Show you the quick rundown. So these are a lot of tips. It'll go pretty quickly. We're not going to spend too much time on each tip, but obviously you're not going to use every one of these tips for every conversation. But the idea is as you're going through this presentation to kind of just make a mental note of which ones may work well with certain people in your life, and hopefully you'll find at least a couple tips that are going to help you throughout this. But as I said, this is definitely a work in progress, and definitely let us know if you have more tips that we can add, because we want this to be a public resource to kind of help people have these really tough conversations that really need to happen. We really need to be having these tough conversations, and all of our white circles as much as possible at this point. Cool. So I'm just going to go ahead and dive in. I'm going to turn my video off, and we'll go ahead and get started. All right. So number one, first tip is don't unfriend your friends that your racist friends, or your friends that maybe not necessarily racist friends, but friends that say a lot of racist things all the time and really frustrate you. So I know it's so easy just to kind of cut off that tie, especially if these are people you have tried to have conversations with for a long time, and it's just frustrating. Don't feel like it's ever going to change. It's okay to take it's okay to take a break from these people. That's what's great about like in Facebook and all these different social media. There's options to temporarily hide people. I think there's an option to hide someone for 30 days or something, or an option just so that's fine. Hide them. When you need that break, when you're feeling overwhelmed. but unhide them when you're feeling more centered, because unfriending these, these are the people that we need to have these tough conversations with. And as tough and as awful as it may be, and as scary as it may be, this is where the work needs to happen. So I'll read this last quote by Just Jasmine. Unfriending racists in your friend list is the online equivalent to turning a blind eye to suffering of Black and brown people. You can't afford to do that any longer. So let's try to, have self-care, take breaks when you need to, but let's try to stay in this with people. The second tip is to hold space for multiple narratives. A lot of times we fight about whose narrative is we spend a lot of time fighting about whose narrative's right. When in reality, everyone's experiences is valid. Everyone's, narratives are valid. It's not about arguing which one is the most valid. It's about making room for all of them and trying to capture an idea of what's happening with all of these narratives and all these different experiences. Because a lot of times, it's not, our world isn't just about racism. It's also about like white privilege. Like for example, when I say, I have a Black friend that has has bad experiences with cops, like that's one narrative. And then another narrative is, I've never had bad experiences with police. So that's another narrative. So we're kind of painting this bigger narrative of not only like racism, but also white privilege. So one thing that helps, this is using, trying to really use the word "and" over "but." I know it just sounds like very simple and simplistic, but and it makes a difference, especially if you can make this a regular thing in your life. It really, it not only makes it, makes you feel like you're opening yourself up to more narratives, but it's also you're communicating, openness and to other narratives. For example, when I say, let's say if I'm, when I use "but," I say my Black friend has bad experiences with cops, but I've never experienced it. So oftentimes when you say "but," it negates everything before you say it. You say, this thing is happening, but I'm not doing, I'm not experiencing it. So it definitely negates it. But if you could just switch that "but" with "and," say my Black friend has bad experience with cops and I've never experienced it. So now we're capturing the bigger issue. We're validating everyone's experiences, but also we're getting to the root cause of a lot of things. It's not just about racism, but it's also about white privilege. Police are do a really great job protecting and serving white people, and don't do that, the same, that same amount, that same level when dealing with non-white people, and so we're capturing the bigger story here. So let's, instead of arguing against narratives, let's make room for as many narratives as we can. So this is a big one. This is probably one of the most important ones, is learn when to call out versus call in. So let's say, someone, a friend of yours, said something that it sounds pretty racist. You have two options. You have three options. You can just ignore it, and which is what we're trying to get past. Whites, being silent is the same as being complicit, and being supportive of it. So hopefully we can get people to go past that and actually say something about these things. But you can, you have two options when you can call things out, or you can call things in. And call out, so this is, I'm sure everyone sees this. This is what probably happens more often, especially in social media. Someone says something racist, and immediately someone on the comment and says, that is racist, or how can you say that racist thing? And then it becomes this like kind of this reactionary fight, where that just doesn't really go anywhere. But there are reasons why you would want to call out. A lot of times it's like, do you want to create, a teachable moment? Maybe your goal isn't to change this person's behavior, but it's to kind of address all the, the people who liked that post and are on board with that, what that person's saying. Maybe you want to create a teachable moment for them and talk, and so it's more about, confronting this action to kind of show other people, what's going on. A lot of times, like, people in power, like, I can't really necessarily call in, a celebrity or like J.K. Rowling right now, who's like, saying all kinds of transphobic things. I'm not just going to call her up and be like, hey, can we have a cup of coffee so we can call that? That's not possible. So a lot of times, we have to call that stuff out. This is part of, like, holding people in power who have privilege over other people accountable. And a lot of times we need to respect the fact that, because particularly, marginalized folks, marginalized people, they they typically don't have that amount of power, to call people out. They especially in our history, have not had that voice, have been silent. So when they do call out, I think it's important to kind of support that and kind of back that up as well. But I mean, I think, and at the same time, we have to understand that calling out isn't necessarily the most effective way to kind of change behavior. So that is, if our main goal is that we want to, change behavior of a particular person, we want to get this person to stop saying this racist thing or to see why it's racist, then call out isn't really always the best option. So that's when we want to turn to call in, and that is a lot more effective. So call in is, it's just the opposite of a call out. Call out is done publicly. Oftentimes it's shaming people publicly. Like I said, sometimes it needs to happen, but most of the time, especially if we want to get people to change their behaviors, we need to call in. So that's done more privately. That's done more as a place of compassion. That's more done as, like, I actually want, care enough for you, that I want you to change. And it's not, so it's more about, sending a message, a text message, an email, saying, hey, can we talk about, this thing that you said, can we grab a cup of coffee? Can we have a quick, phone call? And it's more about just focusing on the behavior and doing it in a non-confrontational way, where people are going to be more open to actually listen to you. They're going to be open, they're not going to be on the defense. They're not going to be, I don't have to worry about other people seeing them and feeling like they need to stand up for themselves. Especially if you do it in some of the ways that we're going to talk about through this presentation, they're going to let down their guard and hopefully be able to hear you more. And this is more about, kind of getting away from shaming and more about building trust in mutual, relationships with that person. And at the same time, if you could do this in person, which I know is kind of hard right now, but and normally in person, it's so much more effective because there is what's called the 7% rule, where nonverbal communication is the majority of our communication. And I've taken a whole bunch of, I've worked in different, troubled youth therapy, situations where we had to be trained in de-escalation, tactics. And it's really true, majority of the tactics that we use are nonverbal, about how we stand with a person, how our facial experiences. Like, I used to be also a street canvasser, one of those annoying people that, tries to get, sign up for to help out with different causes. And one thing, I learned is we use different muscles when we smile, when we real smile and fake smile. Our body, we can, instantly, recognize that and instantly have different, biases and different, reactions based on whether people are using real muscles or fake muscles when they're smiling. So I would always think about a really funny thing before I would approach somebody, so I would have a real smile, and that kind of let people's guards down a little bit. But not to say, this isn't about tricking people, but it's more about, having honest, facial reactions and honest, body language, and that's going to, help people kind of listen to you more, because again, most of what we're communicating is nonverbal. So that's why it's so tough to do. You have these conversations online. on Facebook, because it's yeah, we just lose our ability to communicate most of what we're trying to get across, and typically people hear different things, hear something completely different than what you're trying to say. um, so I like this quote. I picture calling in as a practice of pulling folks back and who have strayed from us. It means extending to ourselves the reality that we will and do fuck up, we stray, and there will always be a chance for us to return. Calling in as a practice of loving each other enough to allow each other to make mistakes. A practice of loving ourselves enough to know that we're trying to do we're trying to do here is a radical unlearning of everything we have been configured to believe is normal. All right. So now that we've kind of established, now that you decided that you want to, do a call out versus a call in, the next best thing, instead of just immediately, reacting to that person, and especially when you're feeling tense, if things have been triggered, if you're feeling the need to be right or to shame people, a lot of times it's just so good just to take a second. I think there's this expectation that we immediately have to respond all the time right away, but man, it really makes a difference just to kind of take a second. Take 24 hours if you can. I write a lot of emails, and I wait 24 hours before hitting the send button. And I'm so thankful that I do, because a lot of times we're just so, and when we're reacting, we're in this tunnel vision. And if we could just sit down for a second, take some breathing exercises. I know you can't always wait 24 hours. Sometimes you need to respond, but even just taking a minute, doing a quick breathing exercise, kind of recentering yourself, walk away for a second, if possible, sleep on it. I've definitely, slept on things and then had a complete, saw things completely different the next day. That's super important to do if you can do it. You can't always do it. Sometimes you're in the moment, you got to say something. But if possible, you can. But if you do have the chance to actually, take a second, think about, what are the intentions of this person? Why did he say this? I know it was super offensive, but behind that there might have been some honest intentions, and it's just that person may just be just any just maybe stuck in this there's so much from our media and our friend circles and family sometimes pump us so much with false perceptions and false narratives and stereotypes and things that even though we have good intentions we may not realize what the outcome of that. So it's good to kind of if you can, find out what that initial intention was. Don't automatically assume, even though this is racist outcome, that there's some racist intention. And that's the power. If you can get if you can see that, that's a really powerful tool to use to kind of change that person's behavior. At the same time, understand what are your intentions for confronting this person. What's your goals? Are you trying to change the behavior? Are you trying to reduce harm? Are you trying to make this a teachable moment? Or are you just trying to hold a boundary? Sometimes we just need to hold boundaries. Sometimes we just need to say, this is not okay. I can't get into it right now, but I need to know that let you know that this is not okay. And that's fine too, but try to get your intentions on that. Try to understand what you're bringing into the conversation. Are you being triggered by certain things? Are you having projections? Are you taking other situations and projecting them onto this situation, like transference? Does this person remind you of another person that you're arguing with, and it's just so much easier to argue instead of let's say you're in a tough relationship, and sometimes it's so much easier to kind of just unload onto another situation rather than dealing with this your relationship. So are you transferring things? Are you projecting things? What are your triggers? I know a big trigger for me is ever since I had children and I've been watching all these school shootings, a big trigger is assault rifles. So when I had particularly people that want to stop any kind of regulations from assault rifles, and that's a big trigger. And when I see that, I immediately think of my kids, and I just want to go off on these people. That never ends well. If anything, that like it helps them solidify their position, even more because they look at how angry I am, and it becomes just about me, not the situation. So if you're having triggers, finding a way to kind of get to a calm place and a non-reactive place helps a lot. And that's, on that same lines, come from a place of compassion, especially if your goal is to change behavior. You're not going to change behavior by, attacking this person, by yelling at them, by shaming them. And like I said, sometimes, people just need to, to hold lines, hold boundaries, we don't need to be tone policing people, especially when people are coming from a marginalized place. But at the same time, if we want to, we also need to know if we want to actually get to some of the roots of these problems and actually get, create change from these conversations, we need to kind of go from a different avenue. So, it's okay if you want to hold boundaries and call out, people in power, but if we want to start changing, individual behaviors, we need to kind of go from a different approach. We need to come from a place of compassion. And that's, again, don't assume that people have these, hateful intentions, try to find what's behind that intention. A lot of times there's good intentions that are just, obscured by, are manipulated by a lot of hateful organizations and political organizations and things, there's a lot, there's a lot of entities and organizations in this world that are trying to manipulate people as good intentions for votes and for power and money and things like that. So we have to understand, to try to find that original good intention. Try to drop this need to be right. Sometimes it's more it shouldn't be that if you're coming from a place of compassion, it isn't about who's right or wrong. It's more about a mutual understanding. It's more about you don't need to shame people, but it's more about active listening, actually listening to not just like preparing your talking point, as the person's talking, but actually listening to them, understanding where they're coming from, reflecting to them, what you've heard, reflecting their good intentions, and then kind of steer them towards the reality of the outcome. That it's despite your good intentions and despite what you're saying, the reality, there are bad outcomes to what's happening as well. So, but understanding, like doing this from a place of compassion is about focusing on reducing harm, not about right or wrong or shaming or good or bad, but it's about let's just reduce harm. Let's have mutual understandings, mutual transformations, and the hope is like that we learn things as well. It's not just one person's right and one person's wrong, and that wrong person needs to learn things, but it's about us having a mutual transformation where not only am I helping this person kind of see another point, but I'm also learning about other perspectives as well. So I'll read this quote by Rebecca Caution. I find that coming from a place of compassion is a powerful and key. Something I learned from taking an allyship course last week run by anti-racism educator and TED speaker Nova Reed. When we as white allies can drop the need to be right and the desire to shame others, focusing instead on mutual transformation and reducing harm, we can truly sow the seeds of change in those we seek to convince to change their views. Facing up to our own guilt and shame comes first. Only then can we come from a place of love and compassion and work towards healing on a wider scale. And then another great point, again, like this isn't going to always happen. Sometimes, especially in the moment. But when this is possible, talk about what the goals and intentions are with this conversation before you start. Let them know I'm having this conversation with you because what's happening in the world, and I want you to join me in action. Or because of the things that you're saying, about race is making it really hard for me to be a friend. I want to continue to be friends with you, but I need you to understand that the outcomes of what you're saying. So let them know the intention, so they know what they're about to get. They're not, you're not going to, like surprise them with some, or catch them off guard, that they fully understand what we're about to have a conversation about. And then ask them for permission. Are you open to having this conversation? Are you open to feedback? Is this a good time to talk? That's really important as well, because maybe at this moment they're not. Maybe they're dealing with some pretty, crazy stuff, and if you, try to open up a new conversation, they're just going to unload on you, or maybe, yeah, I mean, or a lot of or if they are open, and they agree to have this conversation, this can also be used later down the road. Like if you're struggling in this conversation, you can remind them that this is like something we're both trying to work on. Ijoma Alu, writes this a really great article about having better conversations about racism with your parents. I definitely recommend reading it. But she states, state the goal and get people to really sign on to that goal. Say, do you want to do this with me? That gives you something to call back to when people start to get defensive. Say, remember, this is why we're having this conversation, and make sure you're tailoring the conversation towards that goal. And the big one, number 7, the big one is just avoid shaming. This is, try to focus on the action, or a policy, or something someone said, but avoid, actually the person, and this is like, a lot of this is like what they did versus what they are, so this is avoiding on, and focusing on racist action that they perform, not that this person is racist. Because one, I mean, it's so much easier to change a racist action. It's so much easier to change a behavior, just to change a response. But if you're making this about who they are, well, one, they're going to be super defensive. Two, this is not a good conversation to have, because you can't, yeah, this is all speculative. Who they, you're basing who they are based on actions, and that's like super easy to derail, super easy to walk away, super easy to get defensive. Yeah, even if it hits home, it's much harder to change who you are. But it's really easy to focus on specific actions and ideas and change those actions. Instead of saying you're racist when you say this, say when you say when you say this thing, people can perceive it as being racist, and could you say something else? That's so much easier than saying, stop being racist. So Bell Hooks writes, how do we hold people accountable for wrongdoing, yet at the same time remain in touch with their humanity enough to believe in their capacity to be transformed? And that's really key, is we want to hold them accountable, but we also want to believe in their humanity. Believe in their ability to actually have, to transform and change their actions. So let's focus on their actions and give them, the benefit of the doubt, and believe in their humanity. And that, a great thing to do is just affirming good intentions, like listen to them, listening to why they said this, affirming that, I get it, like you want the best for this, outcome, but then directing them to the actual outcomes that, are happening, and saying, I know that you mean well, but this thing that you said is really pushing negative stereotypes that actually are harming people. So, for example, what you said was racist because it reinforces racist stereotypes instead of saying you're racist for saying this. And kind of avoiding like generalizations, avoiding like you always say this stuff, you keep on saying this, like you're always, like avoid that, you're always, or because those are generalizations. Again, they're easy to derail and walk away from, but they're also they're not very effective. You want to be as specific as possible, and focus on specific actions and behaviors that are easier to change. I know I used to work in this wilderness therapy camp with troubled youth, that we take them out to the wilderness, and we learned a lot of de-escalation techniques, and a big one, what we call installation, is when like some kids, it's kind of like, getting to that point where he's feeling out of control of his emotions and can't control himself. We do this thing where it's called installation, where we take the issue that's called, that's causing them harm, and we pull that out and put it in our hands, and then say, look, this is that thing, and it's in our hands. This is that thing. It's outside of us, because when things are outside of us, it's so much easier for us to kind of control it and have power over it. But when it's inside of us and it's part of who we are, it can feel hopeless at times. So like, pulling these, actions, these specific things, pulling them outside of us, and let's analyze it, outside of us, analyze it in a way that's not, judging who we are. This is just an action, and then we can change this action. So really focusing on that, as opposed to who they are, it's a powerful tool. So I'm gonna play this video from Jay Smooth. He really gets into that, talks more about, having that what they did conversation versus who they are conversation.
Race, the final frontier. No matter what channel you watch, no matter what feed you aggregate, it seems like everybody everywhere is talking about race right now. And when everybody everywhere is talking about race, that means sooner or later you're going to have to tell somebody that they said something that sounded racist. So you need to be ready and have a plan in place for how to approach the inevitable "that sounded racist" conversation. And I'm going to tell you how to do that. The most important thing that you've got to do is remember the difference between the "what they did" conversation and the "what they are" conversation. Those are two totally different conversations, and you need to make sure that you pick the right one. The "what they did" conversation focuses strictly on the person's words and actions and explaining why what they did and what they said was unacceptable. This is also known as the "that thing you said was racist" conversation, and that's the conversation that you want to have. The "what they are" conversation, on the other hand, takes things one step further and uses what they did and what they said to draw conclusions about what kind of person they are. This is also known as the "I think you are a racist" conversation. This is the conversation you don't want to have, because that conversation takes us away from the facts of what they did and the speculation about their motives and intentions, and those are things you can only guess at, you can't ever prove, and that makes it way too easy for them to derail your whole argument. And that is the part that's crucial to understand. When you say "I think he's a racist," that's not a bad move because you might be wrong. That's a bad move because you might be right. Because if that dude really is racist, you want to make sure you hold him accountable and don't let him off easy. And even though intuitively it feels like the hardest way to hit him is just run up on him and say, "I think your ass is racist," when you handle it that way, you're actually letting him off easy because you're setting up a conversation that's way too simple for him to derail and duck out of. Just think about how this plays out every time a politician or a celebrity gets caught out there. It always starts out as a "what they did" conversation, but as soon as the celebrity and their defenders get on camera, they start doing judo flips and switching it into a "what they are" conversation. "I have known this person for years, and I know for a fact that they are not a racist, and how dare you claim to know what's inside their soul just because they made one little joke about watermelon tap dancing and going back to Africa." And then you try and explain that we don't need to see inside their soul to know that they shouldn't have said all that about the watermelon, and you try to focus on the facts of the situation, but by then it's too late because the "what they are" conversation is a rhetorical Bermuda Triangle where everything drowns in a sea of empty posturing until somebody just blames it all on hip-hop and we forget the whole thing ever happened. Don't let this happen to you. When somebody picks my pocket, I'm not going to be chasing him down so I can figure out whether he feels like he's a thief deep down in his heart. I'm going to be chasing him down so I can get my wallet back. I don't care what he is, but I need to hold him accountable for what he did. And that's how we need to approach these conversations about race. Treat them like they took your wallet and focus on the part that matters, holding each person accountable for the impact of their words and actions. I don't care what you are. I care about what you did.
All right. I love that last part about, if someone steals your wallet, you're not going to chase them down to figure out if he feels like he's a thief. You want your wallet back. And that's ultimately what we're doing. We're trying to reduce harm. We're trying to get people to stop saying and supporting racist ideas and with the sole purpose of reducing harm. This isn't about, getting everyone to understand how racist they are. This is about getting people to stop, committing racist actions and being complicit with racism. So, all right. So number 8, use active listening and assertive communication. So I'm going to read this quote about assertive communication. Assertive communication is the ability to express positive and negative ideas and feelings in an open, honest, and direct way. It recognizes our rights while still respecting the rights of others. It allows us to take responsibility for ourselves and our actions without judging or blaming other people. And it allows us to constructively confront and find a mutual satisfying solution where conflict exists. So a lot of what assertive communication is just kind of listening, honestly listening, not just waiting your turn to talk, being specific about what you're feeling, and being direct about what you're feeling, and working towards kind of mutual understanding or mutual alternatives, kind of finding solutions together. So a big part of what assertive communication is active listening. So when we say active listening, again, it's about, it's not just about, waiting your turn to talk, but it's actually about listening to what they're saying, honestly trying to understand their intentions, and then even reflecting back to them, making sure you have, you have it, understanding, a lot of times we hear different things, than what people say. So even reflecting back to people saying like, I'm hearing that you're saying this and that your intentions was that, and that your hope was this. And like making sure you got that good, you have it down, maybe you're missing some things and they can kind of, fill in some holes for you. And then not, doing this not from a place of judgment, but from objectively speaking, I just want to understand what your intentions were. I just want to understand your perspective. And then from there, kind of like building on, letting them know how that, affected you. It's much more powerful when you make it about you and how I felt, when we talk about like I statements and things like that. I know some people have gone through like programs and like roll their eyes when they hear I statements, because it's, some programs can be very militant about it, but I statements are very powerful because they make it more direct, and it's not like you don't have to like follow some pattern every time, but a lot of it's just about letting that person know how you feel, how it impacted you, saying like, when I heard you say this, I felt this way, I had this reaction, not just saying, oh, when you say this stuff, it's super bad for, for blah, blah, blah. It's about when you say this stuff, I feel this way and I had this reaction. For example, it sounds like, you meant well when you said this, but I felt like it could be perceived as racist because it reinforces negative stereotypes. Or I feel like when you say these things, it's hard for me to continue to be friends. So making it about, yourself, making it direct, and letting people, not trying to kind of, beating around the bush or watering things down, just being very honest, understanding where they're coming from, and then letting them know how that, makes you feel and how the reactions that you had, and just being honest with it. And then the last part is not just leaving it like that, not just trying to like shame people, but actually trying to find mutual understandings and alternatives. So you may be suggesting things like, maybe instead, when you say, instead of saying this, have you ever considered saying that, instead of doing this action, have you considered doing something else that's less harmful? For example, I feel you meant well when you said this, but what you said can be perceived as racist because it reinforces negative stereotypes. In future, could you say this instead to get your point across? So making, providing some alternatives, and then, like in hearing about what, hopefully you guys can create the alternatives together. That's when it's most powerful. But definitely, suggest some possible alternatives and hear what they feel about that. This is so much better than just saying, hey, you're racist, or that's racist. Actively listening, being direct, making about what you felt, and then working together on solutions. So another big part, so you're going to hear this, it's a little bit redundant, but it's going to be on multiple slides, but just like the importance of asking questions and identifying bridges. So a lot of times, one of the best ways to get people to kind of change their opinions on things and views is listening. Sometimes listening is way more powerful than speaking, especially when you get to the point where you can get them to start challenging their own views and start doing self-reflections on their, and their own views. And especially if you can get them to understand, their own cognitive distances, which we'll talk a little bit more about in another slide. But that's when two opinions, don't, contradict in themselves. But try, like again, try not to assume what's behind, what's behind a racist statement. Ask questions, ask about, this stuff. And the hope is like, as you're asking these questions, and you're learning more about this person, that you start understanding bridges, which is like common beliefs. Maybe you both have children, and you both have this fear for the children's safety, and you can start connecting that. And like, I feel that too. I have this fear, but then I realized, this, action I was doing was actually causing other harm to other people's kids, like you get, like, wanting more cops in schools and things like that. So it's important to try, build bridges, and if possible, if you, especially if you could find something, if the intentions of what they're saying, if you were ever at that point, that's a powerful moment when you can actually say, I was there. I mean, I used to think that, and then, tell them how, what happened to you that caused you to kind of think differently, or caused you to see the outcomes of those actions, model that vulnerability, let people know that, you were just like them, you grew up just like them, you had these, same situations, and this is how you got past it. That's really popular. There's Andres Rondon, wrote this article about, he said, to beat President Trump, you have to learn to think like his supporters. And it's all about this idea of populist leaders. So populist leaders label anyone, kind of standing up to them, or trying to critique them, or trying to confront them as the enemy of the people. So a big goal is to try to prove, especially with Trump supporters right now, there's so much media and so many things they're trying to tell them that, scientists, activists, anyone that just generally disagrees with them are the enemy. So you want to try to prove that you're not the enemy. You want people to know that you're just like everyone else. That we're all the same. And we're not. We're in this together. We're not enemies. So I read this article. Before you try to convince them that they are being racist or worse, ignorant by believing in Trump, you should ask yourself, will this help show them that I am not their enemy? Because what can really win them over is not to prove that you are right, it's to show that you care. Only then they believe what you say. So that's important. So it's not about shaming them for liking Trump. It's like letting them know you actually care about them, and that's why you want them to kind of see what it really means to support Trump. All right. And then number 10, the big ones, like deep listening and deep canvassing. So this is kind of like, we've been talking about building bridges and asking questions. This is kind of taking it to a whole nother level. And this is something that a lot of people are doing lately, especially around elections and trying and door-to-door kind of canvassing and things like that. And it's so much more effective. Like the typical canvassing is like when you go in, you have a script, you say what you mean, you try to keep the conversation under 5 minutes, and you ask them how they feel. But a more deep canvassing and deep listening is kind of spending a lot more time listening and trying to find common ground and common, common, values, and then helping the person actually get to the, see, the outcomes of some of their actions, and actually help them, process this themselves. So the hope is they come to this conclusion rather than you tell them to come to this conclusion. And a lot of this, it has to do with deep listening tips. A big one is data is way less compelling than human stories. Don't overwhelm people with facts. Tell them about your own personal stories with the situation. Model that vulnerability. Let them know that you at once thought very similar to them, but then this happened and it showed you, more to the situation. It showed you a bigger picture. Listening is more powerful than talking. Accepting other people's, even if their ideas feel offensive, may open the door to constructive dialogue. So I know it's really hard. I have a lot of trouble with this. When I hear something super offensive, I feel like it's my duty to just confront that. And sometimes, we don't want to like normalize it, or agree with it, but at the same time, just accepting it without, walking away, accepting it while staying in this conversation. Just that very, can kind of open the door a little bit, later in the conversation, start, open them up to seeing some, what's behind some of this, and seeing the people that are actually hurt by these ideas and their intentions. And the idea is you want to make it, make someone comfortable with talking to you and eventually hearing you. So it's about building trust. It's about making them comfortable to actually want to hear with you, and trying not, instead of just being on guard and constantly, in a reactionary mode. And this is really, like I said, a lot of people, so it's taking deep canvassing, is basically taking these deep listening techniques and then kind of incorporating them into campaigns and elections and things like that. And it's powerful. I mean, there's this is a really great article, how Call Hub, Everything You Need to Know About Deep Canvassing. It talks a lot more about, you know, a lot of this is just like, you know, when you go there, you ask the person their opinion, maybe, you know, talk about a personal story, get people to start talking about it, and just open it up and trying to find those connections. And the hope, and like I said, the hope is that they actually realize that there's cognitive dissonance, that there's, you know, that they come to the point that maybe they should change. And that's why this is really, you know, effective. Is one is self persuasion. You know, getting, you know, just telling people they should change their mind is really hard to do, but getting someone to realize that they need to kind of change their opinion a little bit based on, you know, outside experiences, like outside of their own experiences. I mean, that's a powerful way to really, you know, establish new beliefs, core beliefs in people. You know, it involves active processing, so it involves, you know, actually, you know, both of you kind of processing your situations and how, you know, and the bridges and how they're alike and things like that. Perspective taking, so it opens up and allows, you know, it builds trust and makes people comfortable enough they can actually hear additional perspectives. And again, you know, cognitive dissonance is a tension that comes from holding two conflicting thoughts in your mind at the same time. This is when your actions don't match with your beliefs. The act of deep canvassing helps people realize that their beliefs and actions don't go hand in hand, compelling them to change. So this is like, well, you know, you could be like, well, yeah, I support, you know, law and order, but I also support, you know, Black lives and humanity, and seeing the humanity in everyone and things like that. So lots, you know, sometimes those things, you know, don't work well, you know. So if you, you know, so the idea is kind of seeing that a lot of our law and order policies actually dehumanize people. So if you support humanity and support law and order, there's a cognitive dissonance. And so it's, you know, about kind of just, you know, but it's not telling people that, it's having them kind of, you know, realize this on their own. And that's really powerful. And a lot of times, you know, it sounds crazy, you know, like complicated, but a lot of times it's just about asking questions and listening. And eventually you do that long enough, you're going to see patterns, you're going to see bridges, you're going to, you know, find connections. And that's when you kind of, you know, share your own experiences and things like that. So, I mean, like if this is overwhelming, just ask questions and just listen, you know, as much as you can. I mean, that's like the basics of this. So there's a great, I didn't post the name of the school. I think it's called like Radical School, but they do a lot of videos on this, on deep canvassing and deep listening. And we're gonna watch two real quick videos. The first one's about how to actually affirm. You know, they do the ABCs: affirm, bridge, and connect. So affirm is when you affirm something that a person says. You kind of active listening. You repeat it back to them. Like, I hear that you're saying that you believe in this, and then you bridge to your own thinking, you say, you know, by saying, and I thought that, you know, at the same time, I had the same concern for my kids. I had the same concern for my community. And then connected by telling your personal story. And then hopefully that personal story will kind of, you know, model how to actually get past, you know, some of these opinions. So I'm gonna play this video that kind of models it out a little bit for you.
One useful technique to put radical listening and vulnerability into practice is the ABC. It's an important skill that can make your deep canvassing go much better. But the ABC is also useful in a variety of other situations in both your personal and work life. Next time you're in a tense conversation or heated argument, or at the door for any political issue or campaign, try these 3 simple steps for radical and effective communication.
The first is affirm. Find a way to validate something the person has told you about who they are and what they think or how they feel. Affirming builds trust and sets the conversation up for success.
Bridge. Start with an and, not a but. Let the person you're talking to know that you take their thinking as seriously as you take your own. While this doesn't mean that you have to agree with them, it does mean that you have to care about what they're saying. Using phrases like and, the way I see it, I also think, diffuses our tendency to get on the defense and lets the person know you value their thinking.
Connect. We often hide behind figures and facts to try to prove our point. This is almost never effective. Instead, try to communicate your perspective with real lived experience. It is impossible to argue against a lived experience, and it allows you to communicate your values and highlight the experiences that connect us as people universally, like a loss, discrimination, injustice, and hope. Let's try it.
Using the ABC technique, I'm going to attempt to talk to Estignola as a canvasser about mass shootings in schools. Specifically, I want to know what the community thinks about the proposal to arm teachers.
Oh, it's a resistance school, not radical school. Sorry. So I'm actually going to play their conversation on the next slide. So this is actually them, trying it out in person. So I just want to show what it looks like. And I think the important thing on a lot of this is you're not going to get always radical change right away. But a lot of this is about just kind of opening up the door for people to even just allow other perspectives and thoughts. And so.
Who is it?
Hi, is Estignola home?
Who's asking?
Hi, Estignola. I'm Carlos. Hi, I'm Carlos. I'm canvassing the neighborhood today, and I'm really interested in what you and other people think about the proposal to arm teachers in the United States. I'm wondering, on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 meaning you disagree, 10 meaning you agree completely, how effective do you think arming teachers would be in stopping school shootings?
I think it would be highly effective. You could put me at a 10.
Oh, a 10. Okay. I would love to hear more about why you think it would be effective.
Well, I work at the high school down the street. I've been a custodian there for 25 years.
Oh, the high school?
Oh, yeah, certainly.
Oh, great. I graduated from the high school.
Oh, great. Don't remember you. Maybe you've changed.
It's been many years ago.
Okay, awesome. Yeah, so I've just seen a lot of things in how kids treat the school. I've seen certain behaviors that are, very questionable. And, I think arming teachers would certainly single out or prevent, I should say, any lone wolf who thought it would be a good idea to shoot up a hallway of students. And myself, I want myself protected as well.
Right. No, I completely agree. I can't imagine working in a school in 2018. That sounds really scary. And thank you so much for the work that you do.
You're very welcome.
From my perspective as a student, I think that walking into a classroom with teachers who are armed, I don't think I would feel safe. I mean, I remember watching some of my peers fight teachers. I mean, sometimes it almost got physical. And I can't imagine what would have happened in that situation if the teacher had had a gun.
I can. That student would have sat down.
Well, maybe some of them would sit down, but I think actually a lot of students would probably try to grab the gun away from the teacher and use it themselves. So I honestly just don't think that having teachers be armed is actually going to be effective. I don't know if you heard about the story of the teacher who actually walked out of her classroom and talked the student down from shooting the school. Did you hear about that?
Nope, enlighten me.
Well, she walked out of her classroom, she heard the gunshots, and she could tell that the kid needed help and said the right things, used the right tone, and he said, I need help. And she actually convinced him to drop his gun until the cops came, and then they arrested him. But I just thought that was really beautiful because it showed me that there are other ways to prevent these things from happening than just giving people more guns.
But that was just one teacher.
Yes, it was just one teacher. But I think other teachers are capable of doing it. I mean, I don't know. What do you think it would take for other teachers to be able to do that?
I don't know. I'm just thinking about, some of my buddies who were also custodians at the middle school down the street who lost their job last year because of budget cuts. So I know firsthand it takes money to invest in teachers to make them where they need to be,
yes.
Because teaching already is a hard job, yes. So it might take money, but I don't know. People don't necessarily pick up on how to support people in terms of crisis, in situations of crisis that easily.
No, I completely agree with you. I think we need full funding for public education. And I also remember having one guidance counselor for 500 students. The guidance counselor didn't even know my name until senior year. That's because she was supposed to help me apply for college. So I think we definitely need more guidance counselors in our schools, right? If young people walked into school feeling supported emotionally, do you think that maybe less students would want to shoot up the school?
It's possible. It's possible.
Well, I definitely think that we need to figure out other ways to prevent these school shootings. I definitely think we need to keep schools safe. I think we need to keep people like you safe or, working really hard to keep our schools clean. But I do think there are other solutions, and I'd love to think more with you about other ways to make that happen.
Okay.
Well, so now that we've had this conversation, I'm wondering what you think, again, on a scale of 1 to 10. How effective do you think it would be to arm teachers to stop school shootings?
I mean, just based on this conversation, I'm at a 7.
Okay.
But until I see those changes where kids get supported, I think it's totally fine that teachers should be armed in the meantime.
Well, I completely understand where you're coming from, and thank you so much for taking the time to speak with me. I really appreciated it. Thank you.
All right, and so the Resistance School has tons of videos. So if you want to, have, if you learn a lot by like watching other people do it, definitely check out their YouTube channel. But I think a couple of things about that, one, I think it's important to understand, like I said earlier, we're not creating radical change. It's really hard to get that, the point wasn't to get her from 10 to 1. The point was to get her to, and when she was at 10 about arming, teachers, she was at a point that she probably wasn't hearing any outside perspectives from that situation. So even getting her to like, a 9 or 8 is still cracking the door open where hopefully she's going to be open to other perspectives that are going to try to lead her. So I think that Carlos did a great job just affirming everything that she felt, not fighting anything, not saying I can't believe you feel this way, or that's just not true, but affirming everything, finding bridges, finding connections. Like they both go to the same school, they both have similar experiences with the lack of guidance counselors, and then connecting that to how Carlos came to the reasoning that arming teachers it wasn't a great idea for him. So hopefully that was useful, but definitely check out their YouTube channel, the Resistance School. It's pretty there's a lot of great videos. So 11. So the next one we're going to talk about is morally reframed. Morally reframe your arguments. So we talked a little bit about this. This has a lot to do with just like kind of building bridges and connecting, but a lot of this is being intentional about understanding who you're talking to, who your audience is, and not just understanding like that the values of that audience. I know a lot of I grew up in like a white steel town, redneck kind of conservative steel town in Ohio, and so most of that audience is very conservative and has like a lot of, but they have a lot of values on things like patriotism, Christianity, law and order, fiscal, being fiscal conservative, some of them. So if when I get in these conversations, it's better, I don't want to frame this from, values that I have. I mean, that's a big thing that we always do when we get these conversations. We frame this based on, our approach is based on our values. We try to get people that may not share our values to change their minds based on our values. And that's just not going to work. I'm not going to, tell them, like maybe not necessarily talk to them like if we're trying to get people to support what's happening with the protests against police brutality. I may not want to dive into values of like a lot of my values of like posing being an racist activist and dismantling white supremacy and all these things. That may not be the best approach to talking to people that may not share the same values, but I can still morally reframe it about patriotism. A lot of what's happening like in Oregon right now when we have these these like marked federal police people are just snatching people off the streets. Like that is a direct attack to our Constitution, to our country, to our values. So making it about patriotism is we need to like stand up for our Constitution, and we need to get these marked federal police out of our cities. So that's one way. Talking about Christianity, talking about I know if you have a lot of there's so much great social justice lessons taught by Jesus or throughout the Bible. So trying to find out some of those. There's some really great Google on there's a lot of great articles that have those connections, and just making it about what would Jesus do, what would a Christian do in this circumstances? Would a Christian support people in need, help people that are struggling, and then talking about law and order too. I know law and order is often like a dog whistle. That means something else. Like Nixon first created this dog whistle as he was brutalizing civil rights activists. So, but there is some legitimate concern. They do have values on law and order. And like so framing these arguments about especially about police, like police do too much right now. They're basically supposed to be social workers. They're supposed to be, EMT people. They're supposed to be all these different roles. And that's just, that's making them less effective as police. So if we actually pull that back and to fund them a little bit, actually move some of their funds to start hiring more social workers and things like that, we can actually have a more, impactful law and order. So you can frame it about that. It's just like, what's the best way to get to law and order? Well, actually defunding the police can actually help that out. And even, maybe not even using those words as well, but talking about just, reallocating funds, from police departments to, social programs. And then even fiscal conservative, talking about the economy and talking about, you could talk about how much money we spend on our prison industrial complex and how much more expensive it is, billions of dollars expensive that criminalizing things instead of doing treatments and things like that and investing in communities. So policing is actually one of the most expensive things a lot of cities pay for in their budgets. So I'm going to play another video by Rob Willer that's going to talk a little bit more about how to morally reframe arguments, especially around different people with different political views.
Divide. So one of the most robust findings in the history of political psychology is this pattern identified by John Haidt and Jesse Graham, psychologists, that liberals and conservatives tend to endorse different values to different degrees. So, for example, we find that liberals tend to endorse values like equality and fairness and care and protection from harm more than conservatives do. And conservatives tend to endorse values like loyalty, patriotism, respect for authority, and moral purity more than liberals do. And Matt and I were thinking that maybe this moral divide might be helpful for understanding how it is that liberals and conservatives talk to one another and why they so often seem to talk past one another when they do. So we conducted a study where we recruited liberals to a study where they were supposed to write a persuasive essay that would be compelling to a conservative in support of same-sex marriage. And what we found was that liberals tended to make arguments in terms of the liberal moral values of equality and fairness. So they said things like, everyone should have the right to love whoever they choose. And they being gay Americans, deserve the same equal rights as other Americans. Overall, we found that 69% of liberals invoked one of the more liberal moral values in constructing their essay. And only 9% invoked one of the more conservative moral values, even though they were supposed to be trying to persuade conservatives. And when we studied conservatives and had them make persuasive arguments in support of making English the official language of the US, a classically conservative political position, we found that they weren't much better at this. 59% of them made arguments in terms of one of the more conservative moral values, and just 8% invoked a liberal moral value, even though they were supposed to be targeting liberals for persuasion. Now, you can see right away why we're in trouble here, right? People's moral values, they're their most deeply held beliefs. People are willing to fight and die for their values. Why are they going to give that up just to agree with you on something that they don't particularly want to agree with you on anyway? If that persuasive appeal that you're making to your Republican uncle means that he doesn't just have to change his view, he's got to change his underlying values too, that's not going to go very far. So what would work better? Well, we believe it's a technique that we call moral reframing, and we've studied it in a series of experiments. In one of these experiments, we recruited liberals and conservatives to a study where they read one of 3 essays before having their environmental attitudes surveyed. And the first of these essays was a relatively conventional pro-environmental essay that invoked the liberal values of care and protection from harm. It said things like, in many important ways, we are causing real harm to the places we live in, and it is essential that we take steps now to prevent further destruction from being done to our Earth. Another group of participants were assigned to read a really different essay that was designed to tap into the conservative value of moral purity. It was a pro-environmental essay as well, and it said things like, keeping our forests, drinking water, and skies pure is of vital importance. we should regard the pollution of the places we live in to be disgusting. And reducing pollution can help us preserve what is pure and beautiful about the places we live. And then we had a third group of participants that were assigned to read just a non-political essay. It was just a comparison group, so we could get a baseline. And what we found when we surveyed people about their environmental attitudes afterwards, we found that liberals, it didn't really matter what essay they read. They tended to have highly pro-environmental attitudes regardless. Liberals are on board for environmental protection. Conservatives, however, were significantly more supportive of progressive environmental policies and environmental protection if they had read the moral purity essay than if they read one of the other two essays. We even found that conservatives who read the moral purity essay were significantly more likely to say that they believed in global warming and were concerned about global warming, even though this essay didn't even mention global warming. That's just a related environmental issue. But that's how robust this moral reframing effect was. And we've studied this on a whole slew of different political issues. So, if you want to move conservatives on issues like same-sex marriage or national health insurance, it helps to tie these liberal political issues to conservative values like patriotism and moral purity. And we studied it the other way too. If you want to move liberals to the right on conservative policy issues like military spending and making English the official language of the US, you're going to be more persuasive if you tie those conservative policy issues to liberal moral values like equality and fairness. All these studies have the same clear message. If you want to persuade someone on some policy, it's helpful to connect that policy to their underlying moral values. And
all right. So moving on to number 12, we're going to talk, we talked a lot about this already, but just the idea of model vulnerability, not data. So data is as anyone's tried to unload a bunch of data to prove a point to someone that disagrees with you, it's not very effective. I mean, one, it's like, anyone can produce data. So even though if you're pulling your data from the most, respective sources, people, another person may not see that. And two, it doesn't go very far. What goes farther is actually making, human connections, emotional connections, being emotional vulnerable. Don't overload someone with data, more data they can handle. So I had this, anti-racist facilitator that kept on saying, when you're stuck, go deep. So when you're trying to prove a point, you can't go any farther and you're just hitting walls, go deep, get vulnerable about why you believe this, make it personal, especially if you already have a connection. If this is a family member or friend that already has a connection and already has some kind of compassion or love for you, or trust, let them know that, I believe in this because, I mean, this situation, affected me, this way, this hurt me in a certain way. I used to believe, or model how I used to believe this, but then this happened and I was on board with what you were saying. I understood it, but then, this thing happened and it kind of showed me, a bigger picture. Then invite them to share, how did you come, to that decision? How does that affect the people you care about? And try to make it about human connections, as well. And also, that same facilitator would always say, remember, waking up is painful. Like what we're asking sometimes for people to do when to support things and change their beliefs is oftentimes going to alienate them from their current networks and from their current, family structures and comforts and beliefs and cultures and histories and stuff, and that could be a painful process. So we want to make this, a human connection, an emotional connection, not just something that's non-human. And a lot of times too, as well, if all you're doing with a particular person is just constantly confronting them, you're not going to get that far. Sometimes we need to actually build connections with people. We need to build shared joy, shared experiences. So, instead of just always being like, hey, can we talk about this thing that this horrible thing you said, try to make some, like, hey, let's grab a cup of coffee, let's have some lunch, let's go, on a hike, try to build some joy, especially if it's like a family or relative, that, let's, hang out, enjoy each other for a while. And then when we're feeling good, let's talk about, not confront, but talk about what's happening, and what, and kind of go into that call in, once you built that shared joy, because that shared joy is going to allow you, it's going to also build trust and connections, and it's going to allow the other person to kind of hear you more. So I'm going to read another quote by Ijoma Olu. I think it's really important to start first from a place of your own ignorance that you once had. A lot of times when we start conversations about justice and social justice with people, we may not believe that these issues are important or understand why there's so much urgency around them. We forget at one point we didn't think that there was urgency either. I always advise people to think about what brought them to the point where they realized it mattered, and to share that story. Talk to the people that you care about who aren't understanding this and say, I used to think that same way you did, but I know, like me, you care about people, and I want you to hear why I believe differently, and kind of share your journey. I really like that last line. I know like me, you care about people. That affirming that, that I know your good intentions, but this is how I figured out that these intentions are actually causing people harm, and this is what I did about it. All right, so now I'm going to play another video called Omid from Social Good Now, about why facts really aren't the greatest thing to convince people. So I'm going to play a clip right from the middle of this video.
Another part of the problem is that our brain is constantly protecting our worldview and sense of identity. So when our worldview is challenged, that same part of the brain that processes physical danger gets activated. This is why people sometimes react so aggressively to information that proves them wrong. And this is why it's often so hard to have an intelligent political debate. Several studies have also shown that there is a backfire effect that happens when people encounter facts that contradict their current beliefs. They actually become more convinced of their original ideas. So fighting ignorance with facts is like fighting a grease fire with water. It seems like it should work, but it actually just makes the whole thing worse. Lastly, there's the problem of lack of empathy. Several studies have found that when humans are divided into groups of any kind, we instinctively become less empathetic to members of other groups. That means that for survival's sake, we might instinctively empathize less with other races, other nationalities, and even other sports teams. This instinctive dehumanization of other groups is what makes things like slavery and genocide possible in our society. So, what can you do? If you want someone to consider factual information that clashes with their beliefs, first you have to prevent their brain from seeing you as a personal threat. So, look for ways to identify the person as part of your tribe and you as part of theirs. Hey, we're part of the same family. Hey, we're both parents. Hey, we both still play Pokemon Go. Whatever. Anything that communicates that you're part of the same tribe. That's the first step. Second, consider the possibility that you may be wrong. Maybe the facts are not on your side, in which case admitting it will help you model to the other person that it's okay to be wrong.
All right. So in the clip right here. So a couple things about this. I really like this video, like the content. I do also want to kind of mention, looking at this video and a couple other videos we watch. I mean, the contents are really good, but sometimes I kind of feel like they overgeneralize or oversimplify things. Like, especially when you start saying tribal, like we're all just in parts of, tribes, and or you talk, the last video we talked about, we're just split between two political parties. When I think that's oversimplification. When in reality there are these massive systems of oppression like patriarchy and white supremacy, capitalism, all these things that don't that they're affecting all our tribes. They're not just one view versus the other. It's white supremacy affects liberals and conservatives and a whole range of other people. And oftentimes it's easy for white people to say we're all divided in tribes when yeah, we're probably tribal, but you know, other people are just trying to survive, you know, and to call their efforts to survive tribal is definitely oversimplification. But that aside, I think there's a lot of good facts and strategies in this on why, you know, facts just, you know, drowning people with data and facts is not always the best case. A lot of times we do need to make, you know, connections and bridges and realize, you know, that you know, we need to build trust and relationships, you know, to actually be heard. And I also want to mention too, like that I really like the fact that when they talked about in this video, like modeling what it means to be wrong, I found that to be very powerful in these conversations, especially, you know, if I'm, you know, a lot of times I'm reaching these conversations, you know, I'm getting, you know, more, they start from a more reactionary, like I hear something or read about something or experience something that just like, you know, makes me super angry. And then I just go in really angry and just, you know, and then other people are reacting to my anger. And then it's just like, it's just, you know, a lot of anger. And like, I find sometimes, you know, after I sleep on it, I feel really bad. And the times I go back and kind of like, I'll apologize to everyone. Like, you know, I won't, you know, I'll say like, I still believe what I believe. I still, you know, but also I don't like how I approached this. You know, I didn't like how I, you know, reacted to this or what, you know, how I approached it or, you know, what I said. So I apologize and I'm working on this. And I found that, you know, just modeling being vulnerable and being okay with not being right and just apologizing and showing that you're in this just to learn it. That's a powerful thing to do. And I think in a way it also lets down other people's guards, and then they can also apologize as well, or not even necessarily apologize, but just hear you more or you know, and be less reactive. And then we often have really great conversations after that. So that's one thing I wanted to, you know, add, you know, talk about from this video. All right. So moving on to number 13. So build alliances. So this is great. A lot of time, a lot of this is just about these are good for like situations like that, you know, there's going to be some like racist reactions, like let's say like Thanksgiving and family meetings and things, you know, or at workplaces, you know, and it's important, you know, this is kind of about making the game plan, you know, instead of just winging it, you know, coming up with a game plan, knowing that, you know, certain people talk well with other people, certain people don't talk well and actually, you know, are create, you know, a lot of reactions and defenses, and understanding that, and then like, you know, talking to these people ahead of time, you know, like, you know, if your mom, you know, like let's say no one listens to you, you know, and during Thanksgiving, but people listen to your mom, you know, maybe talk to your mom and be like, hey, when dad says this thing, could you know, kind of like talk to him about it, you know, and maybe not even call out. Can you just talk to him about it, you know, before or after the meeting, you know, our dinner as a call in. So it's kind of like just creating a game plan, or at work, you know, maybe there's certain people that, you know, talk better with other people. So, you know, talking to them, be like, hey, and during the staff meetings, you know, when this person says that offensive thing that they always say, can, you know, they seem to like look up to you. Can you kind of talk to them about that, you know? And the idea is to kind of create some kind of intentional, intentional conversations rather than having like gang ups and you know, having, you know, a lot of people, you know, a lot of people just kind of ganging up on somebody, you know, which causes them to be super defensive and not hear anything anyone's saying. So yeah, so it's more just about, you know, like I said, it's about knowing that there's going to be circumstances that there may be some racist, you know, comments and actions, and creating a game plan ahead of time, not just kind of winging it. This is a really great article Rachel Cargill writes about, you know, kind of coming up with game plans and talking about, you know, talking to your family during Thanksgiving. Yeah, a lot of this is just about being intentional about these situations. Another one is just understanding logical fallacies. If anyone's, you know, I'm sure people have been in arguments where that just were circular and just went on forever and just never, you know, got anywhere. And a lot of times that's because the people you're arguing with are using logical fallacies. And that, you know, I mean, that may not necessarily mean that they understand they're intentional about doing it. A lot of people, you know, like are very intentional. A lot of alt-right trolls and stuff are very intentional with this circular arguments. But a lot of people just, you know, like a lot of people who think that, are in it just to win the argument, not to learn things, and so they just are constantly kind of manipulating the argument, and never, really addressing the original purpose. And that's really what a lot of these logical fallacies are. They're intentional manipulations in arguments, with the idea of kind of avoiding actually talking about the real point of the argument. Let's say you're trying to talk about, Black Lives Matter and how, Black lives are devalued in this country. A big logical fallacy here is a straw man fallacy. So straw man fallacy is literally, manipulating the argument into something different and then arguing that thing that's different. So instead of like, if my original argument is Black Lives Matter, and that, Black lives are devalued in this country, and then you change that to the Black Lives Matter movement, it's all about hating white people, and then all of a sudden, I'm like, on a whole nother defense, trying to defend about, it's not about hating white people, and we never get back to the fact that the original point of this conversation was how this country devalues Black lives. So we see this a lot with like the NRA, and anti-gun regulations do this a lot, where you're trying to talk about, regulating guns, and then they, immediately make the conversation about, gun terminology and how you just don't know the language of the guns, or how like, a whole slew of other things. Or we see this like, if people like with, like recently Representative Ellen Omar, when she criticized, Israeli policies against Palestinians, and then instead of actually addressing that conversation, everyone called her anti-Semitic, and then the whole the conversation was she anti-Semitic or not? And we never got back to the point of like what's happening with Palestinians. So this is a very common one, strawman, and it's important to understand these because it is a powerful tool when you can actually call these out, when you can actually say, hey, what you're doing right now is a straw man fallacy, or you don't have to, have a name. You could just say what you're doing right now is kind of manipulating the original purpose of this conversation. And I'll be happy to talk to you about this other conversation some other time, but I'd really like to talk to you about, the original purpose, which is how this country devalues Black lives. And then that ad hominem is about, instead of, dealing with this, issue, it's just about attacking, the people delivering this issue. We see this a lot with protesters, protesting, police brutality. Instead of actually talking about police brutality, let's just focus on, how all the protesters are violent and destroying property. Or I hear it's a lot, it's all just knee-jerk reactions, oversensitive, people, knee-jerk reactions, when in reality, this is actually these are reactions based on centuries of oppression or anything but knee-jerk. So an outlier argument or hasty generalizations is when you kind of cherry pick certain things and then create them generalizations. Like a while ago, there was in Dallas, there was a Black Lives Matter, march, and then there was a shooter, an active shooter that actually shot some police. And like Black Lives Matter did not support that. That wasn't, part of the rally. They are open, they are not, advocating for violence against police, but a lot of people, especially a lot of like political right commentators took that as evidence that Black Lives Matter was a violent organization that wanted to kill police, and then a lot of people ran with that. So so that's important to kind of just call out what that is actually happening. Instead of arguing about them like, no, Black Lives Matter doesn't support violence. Call that the original point of that argument, saying what you're trying to cherry pick information and then create that into a generalization. And then like big ones, like both sides, moral equivalency fallacy. So this is when, something really bad's happening. I think I always think about, when we first found out about, Trump's zero tolerance policy around immigration, and how he was creating these situations where thousands of kids were being traumatized, immigrants of color, migrating, asylum seekers were being separated from their parents and traumatized in these horrific facilities. I remember people were just so outraged, that they were pretty mad. Social media had a lot of mad comments. And especially towards anyone that was trying to defend that. And then there's, there was a lot of bad arguments, and then there was a whole group of what we call the white moderates. They were like, try to make it in a both sides argument, like, you know, like we just, you know, everyone's just out of control, we're so divided, and so, you know, we need both, you know, when in reality, like one side is supporting traumatizing thousands of kids, the other side is just angry and writing angry comments. There's no moral equivalency, you know, there's no both sides, but you say both sides, it kind of you know, it takes away from what's really happening. You know, it's like when you're dealing with racism, it's something like a racist institution, instead of saying racism, you say racial divide. When you say racial divide, it makes it seem like there's like some two sides of an argument, you know, about race, and it's not. So, you know, when in reality racism is one side is being harmed and one side's benefiting from racism. It's not a two sides debate. So another one that's really important is whataboutisms and purity politics. You know, this idea that, you know, if you're trying to talk about something and they give you a whataboutism, like, well, what about this? What about that? You know, I'm trying to find, you know, like, you know, so like if you're trying to talk about police brutality, and immediately someone's like, well, what about black on black crime? You know, which, you know, there's black on black crime, you know, just like there's white on white crime, and there's like, you know, Asian on Asian crime. It's in fact that most people who perpetuate crime perpetuate it in within their race, you know, but no one ever says white on white crime. No one ever says these things. They only say black on black crime because it's a way to kind of, you know, take away from the real issue of police brutality. And then, so whataboutism is trying to find something that's wrong and saying, well, you can't, you know, we can't talk about police brutality because black people are also killing themselves, you know. But in reality, you know, like that's just, you know, it's a distraction from what's really happening. And then gaslighting is when you actually provide false information, you know, or present or try to make the victim of the person doubt themselves. Like, you know, when a black person says like something about their experience and you say, oh, I'm sure there's more to the story, or you really have nothing to worry about if you don't break the law or do anything illegal, when in reality, like tons of black people that don't do anything illegal are brutalized by police. And then white explaining is based on this, like, we live in a white supremacy society where white culture is the norm, and white people feel like they have the what's called moral authority, where white people are the ones that get to define, you know, what racism is. You know, that's why if you look up Webster, you know, dictionaries and different dictionaries, we have a really horrible definition of racism. It's very only attuned to like beliefs, like you have to believe you're a racist to be a racist kind of thing. So yeah, so white supremacy, you know, explaining it's like basically white people trying to explain the experiences that black people, you know, live and are dealing with racism. So, and a lot of this is this constant, like, show me the evidence of your impression. It's a constantly, like, you know, black people having to defend the realities that they're experiencing instead of just white people believing them. And that's so easy for white people to just be at a place of privilege where they can do that. Cool. And then, so step 15 is prepare rebuttals ahead of time. So I'm not saying script everything, don't script everything, you know, make things personal, you know, but also know why you feel a certain way. Know why, you know, when people say black on black crimes, that's a you know, bullshit argument. You know why that is. Don't just, you know why you support different things, you know, come up, you know, create, you know, good, you know, rebuttals to what you're saying before at times. And like I said, you don't script it, don't make it, you know, cut and paste it, but you should know on spot. I mean, this should, you know, when you're having these conversations and if you're like, well, why do I think this? That's not going to help you. So try to, you know your stuff before you have these conversations. And we actually created, in People's School of DC, we created this big long list of different common excuses people give to deny racism and white privilege, and we provide a lot of information and possible rebuttals. So if you're not sure, you know, if you're seeing the same rebuttals over and over again, you're not sure how to really respond, you know, it's a good idea to, like, you know, write out some good responses that you can start using. Again, like, you don't want to be scripted, you want to personalize it, but you should have a pretty good, you know, solid understanding of what you're saying. For example, you know, there's a lot of these are some, you know, we did this exercise in one of our classes where we talked about a lot of excuses that we're hearing right now with the protests against police brutality. For example, some people are like, well, people just follow the law, don't run, they get out of the car, don't get out of the car. If they follow police orders, they'd be fine. And in reality, a lot of Black people are dying in custody. All these people, Sandra Bland, Freddie Gray, George Floyd, these were all people in custody that were murdered, so none of that's irrelevant. And I really like this quote by Solange. Dear world, Black people do not want to exit our vehicles in cop-related instances because we've seen that in murder too many times. So we know that, police are more liable to actually murder you because of your skin color. That's going to cause you to react differently than white people. A lot of white people are like, well, I know I should follow orders exactly, but it's because we're not as worried about being shot or having police overreact to us, or having racial bias from a person that has a gun and authority to use it. So it's important to understand that, and even not following the law, not running, all these things, none of them deserve to be should be shot. None of these things justify actually shooting people. So. And then, another one is many of the people killed have criminal histories, and this is actually victim blaming. Yeah, when George Floyd was killed, there's a couple media outlets immediately started talking about how his past, criminal histories and drug use and things, but again, none of that stuff, justifies his murder. None of it. It's actually victim blaming. It's taking the attention away from the murderers and putting it on, blaming it on the victim. And that happens a lot to Black people killed by police. We treat white terrorists, like Dylan Roof and people like that, better than we treat Black victims in the media. And what about Black on Black crime? We talked about already. There's white, there's white on white crime. There's Asian on Asian crime. There's Latinx on Latinx crime, but no one says any of it. They only say Black on Black crime, just to, and that's to imply Black criminality and nor white responsibility for police brutality against Black people. So they're trying to manipulate that. It's an excuse. The problem is Black people commit more crime, and you hear this a lot. There's more Black, police brutality to Black people because there's Black people are committing more crime. And one, there's multiple, things to unload on that statement. One is oftentimes these statistics that say that are very skewed. A lot of times there's statistics that prove there's more Black crime in Black neighborhoods because the law is not enforced. Because we over police Black neighborhoods, which are going to automatically, direct result over policing is there's going to be a lot more crime and a lot more, stops and arrests. And at the same time, we don't evenly police things, so even though white people use and sell drugs at about the same rates as Black people are 3 times more likely to be arrested for drugs and 5 times more likely to be incarcerated for drugs. Even though white people and Black people use drugs at very similar rates. And the underlying issue too is the major indicator of crime is poverty. It's not race. Right? Poverty, regardless of race. You could throw any race in the same concentrated poverty environment, and they're gonna there's just people have to survive. If they can't survive legally, there's no economic opportunities. They're going to find other ways to survive. So a lot of this is is proof. Some of these statistics are proof that we need to invest more into these communities. We have a long history of a long, very racist history of concentrating Black, pushing Black people into concentrated poverty, and then disinvesting into these neighborhoods. And then when there is issues with crime, instead of actually reinvesting and building the community, we just over police it, which makes it even worse. So why can't they protest peacefully like Dr. King? Well, look at what happened to Dr. King. We killed Dr. King, for protesting peacefully. And look at Colin Kaepernick. Literally, you can't not be more peaceful than just to take a knee during a song. And the guy lost his career, for that. So I really like Jesse Williams wrote this. I said this during the BET Humanitarian Award in 2016. If you have a critique for the resistance, for our resistance, you better have an established record of critique for our oppression. So that's like, critiquing Nat Turner for killing a bunch of white people while not mentioning slavery. So. And then I support their cause, but I don't support the looting and rioting. Well, that's a big one. It's like, why do you have that stronger reaction for looting, for property destruction, and why don't you have that same reaction towards, Black people being killed? If you have a stronger reaction, and you could say, a lot of people are like, no, I value life over property, but that's the thing about implicit bias and racial bias is this subconsciously comes out, and it comes out oftentimes opposite of who we want to be. So if so think about this, think about, your reaction when you saw George Floyd, killed, and then your reaction when you saw those buildings burning. And I know a lot of white people, the reaction was bigger with it, was stronger, with the buildings burning. And I think that's something that we need to, start asking ourselves, about. And then Blue Lives Matter, all lives matter. So I think it's important to understand all lives can't matter until Black lives matter. Officers can choose to take off their blue. Black people can. So I really like this as quote: "If Black lives matter bothers you because it doesn't say all lives matter, but blue lives matter doesn't bother you, then really what bothers you is the word Black." And I think that's what we're really getting down, to the point that Black lives matter isn't saying no one else's lives matter. It's saying in this country, Black lives, are devalued. And this whole movement is about bringing value to Black lives, and to, if you feel like your natural reaction is to say white lives matter, then you're part of that system that devalues Black people. Right, and the 16 is a big one. Is you don't have to do this all on your own. Sometimes there is so much amazing media out there, like great quotes and videos and stuff that you can use to kind of help you out. And it's just every day there's more and more good media that's happening, and it's important when you see that stuff, bookmark it, keep it on reserve, and you can show it to so sometimes these media, like they're gonna convince people better than anything anything you can say. So I'll give you an example. So I'm going to play this video. Kimberly Jones, she talks about it's kind of a rebuttal to this looting and what's really happening in Minnesota. She taped this like a week after a lot of the riots in Minnesota. And it was her commentary, and I had a friend recently, her boyfriend was like very anti-reparations, and she like talked to him for a while and could not get him to really see, believe that we need reparations in this country. And then she actually sent them this video, and after watching this video, this guy's like on board now with reparations. So it's important, you don't have to do this all yourself, share these videos and stuff, but don't overwhelm people with like these long articles and stuff. Again, try to find human, media that has human connections and has powerful connections. That's what's really going to move people. So I'm going to play this video real quick.
So I've been seeing a lot of things talking of the people making commentary. Interestingly enough, the ones I've noticed that have been making the commentary are wealthy Black people making the commentary about we should not be rioting, we should not be looting, we should not be tearing up our own communities. And then there's been an argument of the other side of we should be hitting them in the pocket. We should be focusing on the blackout days where we don't spend money. But, I feel like we should do both. And I feel like I support both. And I'll tell you why I support both. I support both because when you have a civil unrest like this, there are three types of people in the streets. There are the protesters, there are the rioters, and there are the looters. The protesters are there because they actually care about what is happening in the community. They want to raise their voices, and they are there strictly to protest. You have the rioters who are angry, who are anarchists, who really just want to fuck shit up, and that's what they're going to do regardless. And then you have the looters. And the looters almost exclusively are just there to do that, to loot. Now, people are like, well, what did you gain? Well, what did you get from looting? I think that as long as we're focusing on the what, we're not focusing on the why. And that's my issue with that. As long as we're focusing on what they're doing, we're not focusing on why they're doing. And some people are like, well, those aren't people who are legitimately angry about what's happening. Those are people who just want to get stuff. Okay, well then, Let's go with that. Let's say that's what it is. Let's ask ourselves why in this country in 2020, the financial gap between poor Blacks and the rest of the world is at such a distance that people feel like their only hope and only opportunity to get some of the things that we flaunt and flash in front of them all the time is to walk through a broken glass window and get it. That they are so hopeless that getting that necklace, getting that TV, getting that change, getting that bed, getting that phone, whatever it is they're going to get, is that in that moment when the riots happen and if they present an opportunity of looting, that's their only opportunity to get it. We need to be questioning that why. Why are people that poor? Why are people that broke? Why are people that food insecure, that clothing insecure, that they feel like their only shot, that they are shooting their shot by walking through a broken glass window to get what they need. And then people want to talk about, well, there's plenty of people who pulled themselves up out of bootstraps and got it on their own. Why can't they do that? Let me explain to you something about economics in America. And I'm so glad that as a child, I got an opportunity to spend time at Push where they taught me this, is that we must never forget that economics was the reason that Black people were brought to this country. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Do you understand that? That's what we came to do. We came to do the agricultural work in the South and the textile work in the North. Now, if I right now decided that I wanted to play Monopoly with you, and for 400 rounds of playing Monopoly, I didn't allow you to have any money, I didn't allow you to have anything on the board, I didn't allow for you to have anything. And then we played another 50 rounds of Monopoly, and everything that you gained and you earned while you were playing that round of Monopoly was taken from you. That was Tulsa. That was Rosewood. Those are places where we built Black economic wealth, where we were self-sufficient, where we owned our stores, where we owned our property, and they burned them to the ground. So that's 450 years. So for 400 rounds of Monopoly, you don't get to play at all. Not only do you not get to play, you have to play on the behalf of the person that you're playing against. You have to play and make money and earn wealth for them, and then you have to turn it over to them. So then for 50 years, you finally get a little bit and you're allowed to play. And every time that they don't like the way that you're playing, or that you're catching up, or that you're doing something to be self-sufficient, they burn your game. They burn your cards. They burn your Monopoly money. And then finally at the release and the onset of that, they allow you to play and they say, okay, now you catch up. Now at this point, the only way you're going to catch up in the game is if the person shares the wealth, correct? But what if every time you share the wealth, then there's psychological warfare against you to say, oh, you're an equal opportunity hire. So if I played 400 rounds of Monopoly with you and I had to play and give you every dime that I made, and then for 50 years, every time that I played, if you didn't like what I did, you got to burn it like they did in Tulsa and like they did in Rosewood. How can you win? How can you win? You can't win. The game is fixed. So when they say, why do you burn down the community? Why do you burn down your own neighborhood? It's not ours. We don't own anything. We don't own anything. Trevor Noah said it so beautifully last night. There's a social contract that we all have, that if you steal or if I steal, then the person who is the authority comes in and they fix the situation. But the person who fixes the situation is killing us. So the social contract is broken. And if the social contract is broken, why the fuck do I give a shit about burning the fucking Football Hall of Fame, about burning a fucking Target? You broke the contract when you killed us in the streets and didn't give a fuck. You broke the contract when for 400 years we played your game and built your wealth. You broke the contract when we built our wealth again on our own by our bootstraps in Tulsa, and you dropped bombs on us. When we built it in Rosewood and you came in and you slaughtered us. You broke the contract, so fuck your Target. Fuck your Hall of Fame. As far as I'm concerned, they could burn this bitch to the ground. And it still wouldn't be enough. And they are lucky that what Black people are looking for is equality and not revenge.
So such a powerful speech. So yeah, when we see these, because there's so many of these powerful speeches happening, and we actually we have a list of a lot of them on the People School of DC's site for inspirational speeches and powerful and significant speeches. These things have so much more impact than oftentimes than us just trying to throw a bunch of data or things like that. So definitely use these, share these with people. Okay, I want to play another video too. I think this is a very powerful video to use, especially when you're talking to people, trying to help them understand white privilege and or understand police brutality. This is a video of Black parents explaining to their kids, what to do, when they experience, when they have run-ins with police, and it just, I mean, as a white, parent, children, it couldn't be more different. This couldn't be a more different reality. And I think it's just a great video to kind of show people the two different worlds that we're living in.
We actually have a line that we do at our house. We've practiced this thing. What is it?
I'm Ariel Sky Williams. I'm 8 years old. I'm unarmed and I have nothing that will hurt you.
It's just kind of a thing we practice at our house. There are great police officers out there. There's also some police officers who are not so good.
And my fear is that you run across one of those bad ones.
For some reason, people of color have always been a target by the police.
Before they became a policeman, they were a person. And that person took all their ideas and all their thoughts and all their prejudice into their job.
Why would a police officer assume that you did something bad? Maybe because of my skin color.
I remember being put in handcuffs for something that had nothing to do with me. I was literally walking in the mall. Cops slammed me on the ground, busted my lip, chipped my tooth. That actually made me really mad.
How about the time they pulled us over with me in the car and arrested me and left all of you guys sitting in the car and nobody knew how to drive on the side of the road because the bumper on the car was kind of hanging off? We live in Puyallup. There's people that don't even have a bumper on their car.
My rear brake light wasn't working, and I got to my destination and they were working.
I was about your age, actually. They grabbed me.
Why?
I didn't know at the time. They just grabbed me. They threw me onto the police car.
I got tased that time. That time they tased me because they said I wasn't complying.
Ariel, are you okay?
What's wrong, baby? I'm okay. I'm alive, all right? Every day I get to see you. I get to do this, right? All right, come on. Let's calm down. Let's finish this, all right? You good? Hey, you making me cry. Come on.
You have to be careful when you're out there in this world because this world's not going to always be honest or fair to you. I know, Sean, you got a little bit lighter than the rest of them, so it's a possibility you won't get stopped.
Sound like you just pulled him over.
Okay. If you're driving, cop pulls you over.
Police gets out the car, comes to the window. What would you do?
License and registration, please, ma'am.
Why do you think I pulled you over?
I don't know, tell me.
When a police officer says something to you, you're black. You can't be looking at them saying, oh, I don't know, why don't you tell me?
Well,
that right there is giving them the license to pull you out of your car and physically harm you because it will be done.
Don't get upset. Don't get sassy. Why did you pull me over? You don't have, I know how, just follow instructions and stay calm.
Okay.
Do you think just being a police officer and pulling you over, regardless of if you feel you've done something or not, they should get your respect?
That's a tricky question.
The answer is yes.
Yes. If you got to go to your wallet to get your ID, say, can I go reach in my back pocket to get my ID out? You could do what I do, and I show them my hands. So when they're walking up, they see I don't have anything in my hands.
I'm Ariel Sky Williams, and I have nothing that will harm you or hurt you.
And what's the next place you put your hands when you're driving or on the steering wheel? Put your hands out.
If at all possible, turn your phone on.
And call someone and put it on speaker.
But whatever you're doing, I want you to say what you're doing before you do it.
You don't write any statements.
Well, you have to write a statement.
You don't have to write anything. You're a minor. I'm responsible for you. No one can tell you anything else.
If it tells you to be quiet, be quiet. Do everything that you can to get back to me. I see it weighing on you, and I don't want it to weigh on you. I'm just worried about Donovan. I'm worried about him now.
Who are you guys talking about?
My nephew and her cousin. I don't want him to be shot. I don't want him to go to jail.
You guys, if you could say anything to police, what would you say?
Learn about people. Learn about their problems.
Take some diversity training. I mean, it should be like at this point, like a monthly requirement.
You know, there's really nothing at this point that they could do that would make me feel any safer with them without them just point blank clearing them all out and starting all over from scratch.
So don't always assume that all of them are bad. But all you see on the news and in newspapers, and it keeps happening. It's just in a different way. It's like how people are like, you should forgive so-and-so, but they keep doing it to me. I forgave them, but they keep doing it to me. It gets harder and harder to forgive them. Wow.
Such a powerful, I mean, just clearly is showing the two different worlds that we live in. I think this is such a powerful video to send someone that's struggling to see that. Even like that, you know, the one, you know, when that woman was talking about don't sign anything without me here, I instantly thought about that Central Park 5 and how they just like took those kids and just like, you know, I mean, literally just like traumatized them to the point where they signed a bunch of things about their parents. And I have never even heard of that happening to white kids, to be honest. And it's like just the world that we're living in right now. And it's just, it's crazy. But also, so, you know, definitely start, you know, I think it's just so valuable to hold on to videos like these and send them. Like, I mean, they're so much more powerful than sometimes than anything we can say. That's another, reason why we're doing the 8-month intro to racism and white privilege course is we record all these videos. We record the webinar, but the webinar has a lot of videos like these. And if you sign up for it, we'll even we even pull out the videos and where the recordings are. You can see all the different videos as well, so you can grab individual videos and kind of use them in your classes and send them to friends and family and coworkers, because I really think that's just such a powerful way to kind of open people's perspectives up. All right, one thing I want to mention, there is so much amazing content, videos and memes and quotes and books that are being, created right now. And there's such powerful resources. And if you're learning from them, or if you're sharing them with your friends, if you're using them in conversations, definitely it's so important just to keep in mind that we need to also support these content creators. Many times these people aren't getting paid. And on top of that, get a lot of nasty comments and a lot of pushback, and even things like death threats and stuff, and a lot of racism directed towards them for creating this content. And at the same time, this content can be hard for them to create. I want to read this quote. Liz Kleinrock, she does this amazing Teach and Transform. She does a lot of anti-racism education and social justice education. Definitely follow her on Instagram. But she writes, I wonder if white folks understand that behind every piece on race by Black, Indigenous people of color, there are years of experiencing and processing trauma, racism, microaggressions, imposter syndromes, and how much healing has to take place before we can articulate it. So I think it's really important if we're using this, just for one, that we respect the intentions of the content, that we only share content that's meant to be shared, that's being posted in social media on YouTube, with the purpose purpose of being shared, that we don't profit in any way without permission. If you're going to use this in a class that you're charging, you know, if you're a fee for going to write a book or something, you need all this content is owned by the people who create it. So please, you know, get their permission first. Respect the intentions of the content. You know, don't, you know, post something and just tear it apart. You know, you post, you know, try to, represent what's actually the intentions of this content, why it's meant to, you know, present it in a way it's meant to be, you know. And then stop. Yeah. Also, if anyone, you know, doesn't want you to use their content, please respect that. But at the same time, it's so important. Like I said, many of these people creating this content aren't getting paid, so it's so important to donate and to these people. Definitely, if you go to most of their Instagram sites and Twitter sites, there'll be, you know, some kind of link, maybe to, well, often to like a Patreon, you know, website. Or they'll have links to their books or workshops or resources. Definitely, if you can't afford it, don't feel shame if you can't, you know, but if you can afford it, you know, support these people, you know, especially monthly donors are a really amazing thing to kind of build, you know, support. If you're looking for more of this content, definitely check out like the People Schools of DC, or we create a whole resource website. It's just full of amazing videos and inspirational, you know, photos and things that you can use. And also that the course that we're doing, the Intro to Racism White Privilege course, has a lot of great content. And we like, when we share it, we record the videos and then share it. We also pull out all the videos that we use and a lot of the content, so it's really easy for you to share. So if you're interested in any of that stuff, definitely go to the peopleschool.dc, peoplesschooldc.org, and check out all the resources. Check out the course. You know, sign up to receive recordings. All right, 17. So now also, you know, taking it one step further, thinking about becoming, you know, what it means to become an active bystander as well. You know, like, you know, call people out in your friends and in you know, family and community circles, but at the same time, you know, think about, you know, beyond that, you know, ways that you can, you know, start helping in your community as well. A big thing is like preparing like alternatives to, you know, calling the police, you know, like diagram, or I'll show you a couple infographics and things, you know, like, you know, you're preparing that stuff, you know, not just waiting for, you know, when something's happening and what should I do? Should I call the police and stuff? Having, you know, guides that can help you, you know, having guides that outline, you know, like, you know, community mediation stuff, homeless lines, you know, and different certain numbers that you can call that aren't the police, you know, and preparing these documents as well. And also, you know, taking active bystander trainings, taking community mediation trainings, you know, taking trainings on recording police, you know, like Cop Watch DC does a lot of work on trying to help people, you know, help record things that are happening. So, and that's so essential right now. I mean, it feels like, you know, there's more police brutality in these days, but in reality, nothing's changed. It's just we're recording and capturing a lot of it, and that stuff, you know, is super, you know, very, very, you know, significant and powerful, you know, when it comes to like, you know, filing complaints and court cases and things like that. You know, take anti-harassment trainings, you know, accompany migrant trainings. You know, Sanctuary DMV does these trainings where you can actually accompany migrants, you know, to do, you know, legal things that they need to do so they're not going to be, you know, captured by ICE. So yeah, definitely, you know, looking at out, try and find ways to be a better active, you know, bystander. So I'm gonna play this video about, you know, being an, you know, how to respond openly to racist attacks, you know, with strangers and outside of your friend circles. But I really recommend actually taking. There's a lot of, you know, I see a lot of bystander, you know, intervention training courses throughout. A lot of them have these, you know, what they call 4Ds. Where you know, see something happening, see someone, you know, experiencing some racist, you know, you know, act, you know, there's different ways to intervene. One is directly intervening, you know, stepping in and saying, are you okay? This is inappropriate. You know, another way is distracting, and, you know, saying, hey, you know, like, you know, pretend like this person's your friend. Be like, hey, we got a table, you know, come up with us, you know, or I haven't seen you forever, and try to just be that distraction that kind of, you know, disconnects what's happening. You know, delegate, you know, finding someone like a bouncer or someone that can intervene better than you, you know, and then delay is like checking with the victim afterwards and just, you know, helping and doing helping them out when you can. But I'm going to play this video made by Bernard Center for the Research on Women that's going to talk more about being some tips about being a bystander.
The United States has a long history of violence against people of color, disabled people, Muslims, immigrants, and LGBTQ people. In our current political moment, white supremacists and white nationalists have been emboldened. And as a result, public attacks are on the rise. Many people aren't sure what to do if they witness a racist or transphobic attack. Here are some ideas. It might be tempting to look away out of fear or because you aren't sure of what to do. But not getting involved communicates approval and leaves the victim high and dry. If you can, talk with the victim. This is about supporting them. Look them in the eye, check in with them. Try not to escalate or provoke the perpetrator. Simply sitting or standing next to someone is better than nothing at all. It's difficult to witness any kind of violence, so try to breathe and stay present. Many assume others will document an incident going on. If it's safe to do so and the victim doesn't object, film or record an incident. This helps to keep track of the rise of incidents like this, and it also ensures that the victim's versions of events can be confirmed. Check in with the victim. Ask them what they need. Get their consent and offer concrete ways to support them. Give them water. Help them get composed. Help them call a friend or even get to a safer place. Armed police presence often escalates rather than reduces the risk of violence in a situation. Because police have been trained to see people of color, gender nonconforming folks, and Muslims as criminals, they often treat victims as perpetrators of violence. So if the victim hasn't asked you to call the police, do not, I repeat, do not call the police. The culture of white supremacy and anti-Blackness is perpetuated by our media, political systems, and social media. You can contribute to making these attitudes unacceptable by challenging white supremacy even when you're not in a crisis. If you're white yourself, talk to your white family and friends about anti-Blackness and white supremacy. Do it every day, especially when you're in an all-white space. By doing this, you confront the culture without putting anyone else in danger of an immediate backlash. Now is the time for all of us who believe in justice to come together. It doesn't have to look one way. You can canvass, you can phone bank, you can write letters, or you can even create art for the movement. Taking it to the streets is always nice. But if you don't have time for that, you could always support the marginalized populations who are on the front lines of this work financially. White supremacy and anti-Blackness affects all of us, and fighting against it affirms all of our humanity.
All right. So I definitely recommend at some point taking some kind of active bystander intervention training. It's just not only will it also it gives you confidence, and will also help you with your we're having these tough conversations individually, but also you could be the advocate beyond just your circles and actually start helping out with that racism that we see every day in our streets and in our buses and in our schools. All right, so here's a couple of examples of like alternatives to calling the police plans. How about being more of an active bystander? Seeing really recommend like getting all your mental health line numbers and community mediation numbers, and calling the police only as the last resort and only when there is like direct harm that is about to happen. Not like and you need to. That's why it's important for us to also work on our racial biases, because a lot of times we perceive harm that's going to happen that's not there. there based on our racial bias, our unconscious racial bias. So it's important to kind of work on that, you know, so you can make the right calls, you know. But regardless, you know, leave police as the last possible option on the table when dealing with situations. And also, you know, recording things like ICE emergency hotlines. You know, when you see ICE agents in your neighborhood, call these lines, you know, and that allows people, you know, to be, you know, get a heads up in their communities. And then like there's even some really great charts where you can kind of walk through this, like, you know, like, is this, you know, if you're not sure about whether I should call the cops or not, this, you know, having these charts and walking through this will kind of help you make the right decision. There's a lot more of these resources down at this website if you want to check it out. Number 18 is like learn to take a rest, but not quit. You know, so we're talking about self-care. Self-care is all about, you know, being the long-term advocate. You know, it's like taking breaks when you need to, doing things to kind of process, you know, what's happening to you. You know, like your experiences, and you know, especially with confrontations. Confrontations and talking, having these tough conversations are super stressful, and then especially if you already have social anxiety. So having outlets, you know, having therapists, you know, that you talk to, having friends you can talk to, you know, at the same time, if you're white, you know, trying to find, you know, white outlets, you know, because a lot of times, you know, unloading the stuff on your black friend is not going to help, you know, it's going to add additional emotional labor to kind of deal, because not only do they have to deal with racism, they also have to deal with you know, dealing with, you know, calling out racism. So, you know, it's finding like white outlets to kind of process these emotions and taking breaks. And, but a big thing is don't announce when you, I see this a lot with Facebook, people announce like, I just had it's too negative, I can't take it anymore, you know, give me a call directly, I'm going to take a break from Facebook. I mean, that's great. I mean, take a Facebook when you need to, but don't announce it, because you know, that's the, you know, the difference with white privilege is literally like, if I want to avoid racism for a while, I can just close my laptop, and that you'll eliminate a lot of what I'm seeing, and you know, Black, Indigenous people of color don't have that option, you know, to take a break. So don't announce it, just, you know, do what you need to do, you know, take a break, but make sure you come back, you know, do this not to avoid, you know, these situations, but to kind of, you know, get the self-care to keep you know, yourself, you know, in the fight in the long run. And again, like we talk about memes, like I have a bunch of memes where I just like, I can't, you know, talk to this person anymore. I can't do this anymore. So, you know, just posting, you know, sometimes just posting memes, like, especially when people are like, you know, white people are like, oh, I can't, you know, everyone just talks about race, you know, it's just so exhausting hearing about racism. So I posted this meme quite often in that response, which is so much easier than just writing these long out, you know, responses that yeah. A big one is like recognize when conversations need a break as well. So Ijoma Alu, you know, writes, you know, again, I think it's also really important to understand when to step away from a conversation that's lost track and say, right now, emotions are a bit high, and I can see that we're not going to be able to get to the goal we have. Can we come back to this in a day or two, and then come back to it? But the biggest part is like making sure you come back to it. Don't like, you know, don't look at this as an out, but really setting, you know, maybe even setting a date. Like, can we, you know, can we talk about this tomorrow, you know, during lunch, or can we, you know, grab a coffee or a beer or something and talk, you know, making that, you know, setting that date for that follow-up. But realizing sometimes people are just, you know, where they're at right now, it's not a good idea to keep on pushing, and it's just actually going to get even more, you're going to be even more distance between what you're, you know, what's occurring if you can continue pushing. 19, work on yourself. You know, this starts with, you know, recognize your own triggers, you know, do your own healing work, you know. So Sandra Kim, she started the Everyday Feminism, a great online media platform. And she does always like online, you know, healing from internalized whiteness workshops. And a lot of times when people hear that, they're like, why would white people need to heal? But in reality, like we all absorb these white supremacy internalizations, these anti-Black internalizations, you know. So this is more about kind of understanding what we absorbed, you know, how do we dismantle what we absorb so we could be better advocates and start dismantling, you know, bigger systems. You know, this is really important, especially if you want to be involved with a lot of, you know, advocacy and organizing. You want to, you know, this will help you be better allies instead of just showing up to a meeting, you know, like a Black Lives Matter meeting and just like dominating and co-opting and bringing a lot of anti-Black, you know, bias, you know. So you want to work on your stuff. You know, Surge has some really great healing circles to kind of help you work work on it, and also work on yourself outside of white supremacy. We have like a lot of stigma against therapy, but therapy is a very important, thing. Sometimes it takes a while to find the right therapist, but it's a very important part of like healing, like, dealing with your own stuff. So you're better, so you're less likely to be triggered, and you're better, more likely to be non-reactive and actually be effective at having these conversations. So, take care of yourself so you can help, be a better advocate to help others. I like some of these quotes, like accountability feels like an attack when you're not ready to acknowledge your toxic behavior, or heal so we don't have another generation of trauma passing itself as culture. So it's really important, for us to do our own work so we're better advocates in the long run. And the last thing I want to talk about is if we're going to be, giving feedback, we also need to understand how to receive feedback. And that's super important, that we're able to actually receive that feedback in a positive way. So we're not only like modeling, what it looks like to have feedback, but we're also, mutual transformation. We're also becoming better people as well. And that's going to make us a more effective advocates. And that helps a lot too. Like I do this a lot when I'm trying to give feedback. I talk about like, I did the same thing you did, and someone gave me feedback, and this is, and it actually was this amazing experience that I learned a lot. I really like this quote. I don't think white people realize that if their black friends tell them, hey, this was racist, it's a sign that their black friend cares about them and is trying hard to save their relationship. So a lot of times we're instantly being like, oh, I thought we were friends, I thought we could talk about whatever. But in reality, like a lot of times we give feedback, it's scary, but we do it a lot of times because we care about, we want to continue having relationships with people. So I'm going to play this Francisca Ramsey short video about, about getting called out and how to actually give, how to apologize.
Hey guys, so today I want to talk about getting called out and how to apologize. And the thing that inspired this video is recently we've had a lot of celebrities in the media screwing up, getting called out, and then offering faux apologies, like Russell Simmons, Paula Deen, Anthony Weiner, most recently Cheryl Underwood. I wanted to talk about another thing that people tend to fall.
I forgot to edit this video, sorry, but I'm going to start this, and I'm going to skip the first 2 minutes.
People tend to fall back on in these instances is their intent. Oh, I didn't mean it like that, or you're interpreting it the wrong way. In these instances, I know that you might think that that makes a difference, but we're not really worrying about your intent here because, of course, you didn't mean to offend anyone. There really aren't that many people that walk around trying to offend people. I mean, there are those people, and they're jerks, and why would you want to be friends with those types of people? Your intent really doesn't matter because it's a matter of intent versus impact. And that's actually something I learned from a really good friend of mine, Jukebox Jones on Facebook. It doesn't matter in these instances what you meant. What matters is what's the outcome of what you said or what you did. I use the example of stepping on somebody's foot. I might step on your foot and break your toe. I didn't mean to break your toe, but your toe is still broken and it still really hurts. So instead of talking about what you meant to do, talk about what you actually did. Which brings me to the next part of this video, good apologies versus bad apologies. Now, the first most common bad non-apology that I hear, I'm sorry that you were offended. That is like the worst non-apology ever, because instead of taking responsibility for your actions, you're putting the blame on the other person and saying that it's your fault that you're offended, not that you did something that offended them. So don't make that mistake. Another one that I hear a lot of times is, I'm sorry if you were offended. That one doesn't cut it either because the person is offended. So there's no reason to bring up if, and it also doesn't acknowledge what you did wrong and why it was wrong, because you're saying if you were offended, I'm sorry, but if you weren't offended, I'm not sorry. And again, that's not how you do this apology thing. A real genuine apology is made up of 2 parts. The first part is you take responsibility for what you've done, and then the second part is you make a commitment to change the behavior. It's that simple, and trust me, as someone that's apologized more than a few times, as someone that's been called out more than a few times, it's not really that hard to do. The best way that I can figure out to drive this point home is to give you an example using myself. So about 2 years ago, I made this video called Queen for a Day, where I dressed up as a drag queen, went around New York City and asked people to guess if I was a man or a woman. I thought the video was hysterical. My friends thought it was really funny. It did really well on YouTube. And it wasn't until about a year later that someone brought to my attention that it was super offensive. They were like, hey, this is some transphobic garbage. Why would you do something like this? Now, of course, my initial reaction was to get defensive. I was like, what are you talking about? I'm not transphobic. What does that even mean? I have friends that are trans. I didn't mean it that way. It's just a joke. You're taking this too personally. I did all of the things that you're not supposed to do. So instead, I stopped and I listened. And they explained that if you're trans, having people try to figure out what your gender is like a daily battle. And it's not really fun and it's super rude. And making a video that encourages that and kind of makes a game or something funny out of questioning someone's gender is basically encouraging people to participate in that type of behavior. And that's really, really bad, especially when you consider the fact that there are trans people who are regularly assaulted and murdered because people are trying to question and figure out how they identify. So once this was brought to my attention, I was like, you're right. I'm so sorry. Didn't need to talk about what my intent was or why I did it. Instead, I just said, wow, I'm really sorry. I'm really going to make sure that I don't do that again. Thanks for bringing that to my attention. I ended up taking the video down, and since then I've really made an effort to be more aware of trans issues and try to be a better ally to the trans people in my life and in my online community. And it was surprisingly not that hard or life-changing to admit that I did something wrong. And it felt really good to know that I fixed the problem and that now I'm part of the solution. The first thing that you want to do is acknowledge what went wrong. And I'll use my example of the Queen for a Day video. I am sorry that I perpetuated transphobic behaviors by making a video that trivializes gender identity. It's a little involved. Might not need to go that in depth, but you get the point. Also, when you acknowledge what went wrong, you want to try and make sure to avoid the words but or if, because that puts conditions on your apology or why you did it. And again, we really aren't trying to talk about intent here. Something that I try to do, and I would love to impart on you guys when it comes to sincere apologies, is to say thank you. Just a super simple, thank you so much for bringing this to my attention, because it takes a lot of courage to call somebody out. It's scary and not fun, and it's a great way to like soften the experience a little bit. The last thing to remember when you're making this apology is don't just say it, do it. Remember that actions speak louder than words, and you can say sorry till the cows come home, but if you keep engaging in that sort of behavior or saying those sort of things, then your apology just doesn't really mean anything. Now that you guys know about getting called out and how to apologize, I want to hear about a time that you had to apologize. It can be something big.
All right. So, really, really like that video and how important it is. It doesn't matter about intent. It's the outcome that matters. And a lot of times, apologizing actually can be this like liberating thing where you could feel like you could be part of the solution. You could start, changing your ways and start becoming an advocate. So it doesn't necessarily mean like it doesn't have to be this bad thing that we always paint it out to be as well. All right. So real quick, Brooke Anderson wrote tips of receiving critical feedback. Just go through these really quickly. First one is just take a deep breath, center yourself. Trust that the feedback is an offering, not an attack. Remember that your self-worth is not on trial. Let go of your attachment to being one of the good ones. That's a lot with white people. We want to be the white good one. We always say, not all white people when people are talking about white supremacy, when in fact we're all born into this system and part of these systems. And there are no good or bad. It's just, oppressive systems that we need to dismantle. Listen, ask questions, take notes, ask yourself, if this were true, what would it mean? Save your critiques of how the feedback was brought. Process elsewhere first, respect emotional labor, offer a clear apology, and commit to a lifelong of shifting behaviors. And I really like this, it's 4 parts of accountability by Mia Menges. The self-reflection, apology, repair, and change behavior. So it's not just about saying, oh, I'm sorry. It's about, reflecting on why this was a harmful thing, why people are bringing this to your attention, you know, apologize, and also repair some of the damage that you may have done, you know, try to, you know, offer some help, you know, or like if it, you know, try to talk to you, understand, you know, how that it kind of affected, and then change your behavior, you know, try, learn from this and be a better advocate from it as well. All right, so those are my 20 tips. But again, this is definitely a work in progress. So if you have more tips that have worked well, if you had feedback or want to add things to it, please email me at peopleschool@gmail.com or go to the People School website, and there's a place to contact us as well. Would love to, you know, keep on adding this and making this a work in progress and making this like a great tool for people to have, you know, have tough conversations. I want to leave this with his final words. This is from A.J. Musk. He was this amazing pacifist, anti-war, labor organizer, but he did a lot of he organized a lot of anti-war protests around the Vietnam War. And there was a famous quote where a reporter once asked A.J. Musk, the Dutch-born American clergyman and pacifist who protested against the Vietnam War, "Do you really think you are going to change the policies of this country by standing out here alone at night in front of the White House with a candle?" Musk replied, "Oh, I don't do this to change the country. I do this so the country won't change me." And that's a lot of times, you know, saying this, I mean, not to, you know, not to say that we you know, we confront people, you know, so we feel better, but also this is more understanding that a lot of times, you know, when you have these conversations, they don't always end well, and it can, you know, it can feel hopeless sometimes. But sometimes we just need to remind ourselves that, you know, a lot of times the outcomes that we you know, a lot of outcomes that we make, we oftentimes don't see that. You know, sometimes you crack open the door for future possibilities, but we don't never see that. So a lot of times we just need to understand that this is, you know, this is part about creating the, you know, the world. And, you know, a lot of times we're doing this so we don't change, you know, so we don't become complicit and complacent with white supremacy, that we don't, you know, normalize this stuff. So even at the very least, you know, that we need to do this stuff so we are part of the you know, a better world. Cool. Well, thank you all so much for joining. Please, yeah, send, you know, let me know if you have any feedback, any more tips, and all that stuff. And yeah, thank you all so much. And have a good day.